The music hit her like a slap. Sharp, vibrating, unapologetic. It was 3:07 a.m., and Eleanor Mitchell lay in bed, blinking at the ceiling fan that had long ago surrendered its rotation to silence. A bass line rumbled from the floor beneath her, thudding like a second heartbeat she hadn't asked for. She closed her eyes and tried to will it away, as if sheer disapproval could mute the world. She had lived alone in apartment 8C for 40 years. The last tenant below her had died in his sleep, precisely the way Eleanor hoped to go, quietly, invisibly, and with no one left to mourn. But now, someone new had moved into 7C, young, reckless, and apparently allergic to headphones. The kettle clicked in the kitchen, a relic from another decade that still did its job without complaint. Eleanor wrapped her robe around her narrow shoulders and shuffled across the cold tile, her slippers sighing with each step. She brewed chamomile tea, the only thing she could taste these days without memories flooding her throat. A cracked mug read, "Teaching is a work of heart." She'd never liked that pun, but it had been a gift from a student, and she never threw away gifts. By 3:30, she was seated at the dining table, staring at the pen drawer. It had been years since she'd written anything that wasn't a grocery list or a condolence card. But this warranted a note. She found a stiff sheet of stationery, the kind with tiny, faded violets in the corners, and wrote with tight, deliberate strokes. "Dear tenant in 7C, the walls in this building are old and thin. Please consider your neighbors. Kindly lower the volume at night. 8C knows sincerely, no name. Just a reminder that someone still existed above him." Eleanor took the stairs. She didn't trust the elevator anymore, not since the incident with Mrs. Hutchins and her dog. She held the note against her chest as if it were a fragile thing, then slipped it through the gap of 7C's mailbox. Her hands trembled on the way back up, but she blamed the draft. Back in her apartment, she sat on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the floor. The music had stopped. She exhaled. Maybe that was enough. Morning arrived, gray and unpromising. Eleanor spent it wiping down the counter, watering the plants that refused to bloom, and pretending the floorboards didn't creak louder these days. She checked the mailbox mid-afternoon, habit not hope, and found a folded piece of paper that didn't look like a bill. It was written in messy, enthusiastic script. "Dear 8C, sorry about last night. Didn't realize the sound carried that much. I'll keep it down, though I do recommend jazz if you're ever awake at that hour. It's good for the soul. Aiden." She reread it, twice, a name. Aiden. It sounded like a boy's name, or the name of someone who'd never owned a landline. She scoffed. Jazz! As if that would change anything. Still, the paper was warm in her hand when she placed it on the kitchen counter. She didn't throw it out. That night, there was no music, but Eleanor couldn't sleep. Her mind kept returning to the note, to the way his handwriting sloped upward like it had somewhere to be, to the fact that he'd written back at all. By 6 a.m., she was at her desk, pen hovering. What did one even say in response? She shouldn't encourage him. It had been just a complaint, a transaction. She wrote, "Dear Aiden, jazz is overrated. If you want to impress your upstairs neighbor, try silence. 8C. She read it, smirked, then rewrote it twice until the tone was just the right balance of indifference and wit. That afternoon, the note disappeared from his mailbox. She waited. That night, nothing. No bass, no jazz, no reply, until the next morning. "Dear 8C, silence it is. But you're missing out. Coltrane is medicinal. Here's a recommendation. Naima. Play it. Trust me." Aiden, she didn't play it. Not then, but the note made her curious. Who was this neighbor who answered sarcasm with grace? She searched for Naima. The melody was soft, melancholic, like someone whispering an apology into a tunnel. She didn't cry. She just listened twice, then made tea. The next day, she left another note. "Dear Aiden, I listened. It was quieter than I expected. Thank you, 8C." His reply came by sunset. "Dear 8C, quiet things often have the most to say. Glad you heard it." That night, Eleanor left her window open, not for the music, for the sound of someone else being alive in the world. By the end of the week, the mailbox exchanges had become ritual. Aiden would leave short notes with song suggestions or strange facts. "Did you know the Eiffel Tower grows taller in summer?" And Eleanor responded with clipped commentary, occasional literary quotes, and once a joke about the French. They never met. Not in the hallway, not in the stairwell. It was safer this way. more manageable, until one note changed the air. Dear 8C, my grandmother used to say her best student lived upstairs. You wouldn't happen to know a Miss Eleanor Mitchell, would you? Aiden Eleanor froze, paper in hand. Her heart, which hadn't startled in years, skipped like a stone over water. Her hand gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. She whispered the name aloud, Marilyn Carter. She hadn't heard it in decades. A memory bloomed. Marilyn laughing in the teacher's lounge, a baby boy on her hip during a late staff meeting. Aiden? Eleanor backed away from the counter, from the note, from the world. Her hands trembled again, not from cold this time. And for the first time in a very long time, she sat down not because she was tired, but because her knees could no longer hold what her heart remembered. She didn't sleep that night. The ceiling felt lower, the air too still. Shadows moved along the walls like memories she hadn't invited. Eleanor Mitchell lay with her eyes open, the name Marilyn Carter echoing in the dark, unwrapping fragments of a past she had folded away long ago. At dawn, she stood at her kitchen table with a blank note card and her oldest pen. The nib scratched softly as she paused over the page, then wrote with a steadiness she hadn't felt in years. Dear Aiden, some names reopen rooms you thought were locked forever. Yes, I knew her. She changed me in ways I never told anyone. Eleanor. She walked down one flight, placed it carefully in the mailbox labeled 7C, and returned to her apartment without glancing back. Her tea cooled untouched. The clock ticked louder than usual. That afternoon, a new note waited for her. Dear Eleanor, she said you were the only teacher who made her feel smart and scared at the same time. She wanted to be you. She kept your letters in a drawer. So have I. Aiden. The paper trembled in her fingers. She pressed it flat on the table and reread each line slowly, allowing the weight of it to settle in her chest. She opened a drawer and placed the note beside the scarf she had not worn in years. That evening, she wrote again. Dear Aiden, she gave me this scarf. Red, too bright for someone like me, but she insisted. Said I needed something that didn't disappear in winter. Do you have anything of hers? Something that still speaks? The reply arrived just after noon the next day. Dear Eleanor, a cassette tape. Label said, play this only when you miss someone too much. It's still sealed. I've never pressed play. Aiden, she read it standing in the hallway. The cassette was easy to imagine. Dusty, waiting. Like a message that could only be opened once the heart cracked just enough. She wrote, Dear Aiden, some things are meant to be heard. Don't wait forever, Eleanor. That evening, a small envelope appeared outside her door. Inside was a cassette labeled in delicate script. Taped to it was a folded note. Dear Eleanor, I listened. It was her, in her kitchen, humming and talking like the kettle was a person. I didn't know how much I missed the sound of her moving. Now you can hear it too. Aiden, she sat on the floor with the cassette in her lap. Her hands searched through a drawer until she found her old tape player, still holding batteries that had rusted at the edges. She cleaned it with a cloth, slipped the cassette in, and pressed play. A woman's voice filled the silence, wrapped in static. If you're listening, it's because you're feeling something you don't know what to do with. Good. That means you're still here. The voice hummed the same tune Eleanor remembered from the teacher's lounge back when Marilyn would rock a baby in her arms and explain grammar with one hand. She wrote later that night, Dear Aiden, I remember that tune. She used to hum it during lunch breaks over spelling tests and soup. You were always watching from the corner in your blanket. You were quiet, but you noticed everything. Eleanor. The next note came with a drawing of a potted plant, drooping slightly to one side. Dear Eleanor, this one misses her too. Watering it helps, but I don't know how to listen to leaves. She did. Aiden Eleanor placed the sketch beside her own plant, a tired fern that had outlived 3 owners. She touched its dry leaves gently, as if introducing it to a new friend. She wrote, Dear Aiden, try talking to it. She said everything alive needs to be reminded it matters. Even us, Eleanor. The next reply was written in tighter script. Dear Eleanor, you mattered to her more than I ever understood. She used to say, if I'd been braver, we would have lived on the same floor. What did she mean by that? Aiden Eleanor sat at her kitchen table for a long time. The question held years inside it. She folded her hands over the note, then reached for another card. Dear Aiden, some friendships carry a weight that looks like distance. She was the kind of brave I never learned to be. But I never stopped missing her. Eleanor. 3 days passed before another note arrived. She checked the box each morning and night, her disappointment folding inward like damp paper. On the fourth morning, a larger envelope sat outside her door. Inside was a drawing of her apartment door, 8C. Every detail captured, the slight crack in the frame, the brass numbers faded to silver, the wreath hook she hadn't removed since December. Underneath it, in small print, "This is where I imagine safety lives." Folded behind the sketch was a note. "Dear Eleanor, I think about the fact that she lived above people for most of her life, and now I do too. But you're not noise. You're the reason I haven't left. Would you ever consider tea? No pressure. I can stay behind the door. I just want to hear you." Aiden. Eleanor held the paper tightly in her hand. The hallway was quiet. Her tea had gone cold again. She wrote back, "Dear Aiden, tomorrow, 4 o'clock, I'll bring the door. You bring the tea." Eleanor at 3:59, she stood just inside her doorway, hand resting on the knob, heart beating in unfamiliar rhythms. From the other side, a gentle knock. Then two, then silence. She stood still, hand resting on the doorknob. The knock had stopped, but the weight of it lingered. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. The hallway was quiet, too quiet, except for the distant hum of the building's old pipes, groaning like memories underneath the walls. She didn't open the door, not all the way, just enough to slip a voice through. "Hello," she said, and the sound startled her. It was the first word she'd spoken to another person in weeks. Her voice cracked like paper folding the wrong way. There was a pause, then softly from the other side, "Hi," that one syllable, warm, tentative, young. She pressed her forehead lightly to the wood between them. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't," came the answer. "But you asked, so I came." They stood in that liminal space for a moment that felt longer than it was, neither quite sure how to measure time when it was filled only with presence. She slid a note under the door, folded, crisp. He picked it up. The note read, "I used to be brave in writing. Now I want to try speaking." On the other side, the sound of a deep breath. "Okay," he said. She smiled, a soundless thing, more felt in her shoulders than her mouth. They sat on opposite sides of the closed door. He poured tea. She could hear the liquid touch the cup. "I brought chamomile," he said. "So did I," she answered. Silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It had texture, weight. "I listened to the tape again last night," he said. "What did you hear?" Her laugh, yours too, faint, but it was there. She didn't remember laughing, but maybe she had. "She used to tell me stories about you, said you kept your red scarf like it was armor." It was. "Is it still?" She looked down at the fabric draped over her knees. "Less so now." "Good." Another pause, a shift, a moment finding its footing. "I brought something else," he said. A small notebook slid beneath the door. She picked it up. The cover was soft leather, worn at the edges. Inside were sketches, plants, doors, teacups, her door, her mailbox, her scarf. On the last page, a drawing of two figures sitting back to back, separated by a wall. She traced the lines with her finger. "I want to keep hearing you," he said. She didn't answer immediately. She reached for her own notebook, tore a page and wrote, "Then I'll try to stay loud enough." She slid the page back. The hallway light flickered, then steadied. "I should go," he said. "Okay. But I'll be back tomorrow. Same time?" "Yes." Footsteps faded. She waited until the building was still again before opening the door. The steam from her tea had stopped rising. She picked up his empty cup from the floor and brought it inside. She sat in her chair, notebook open on her lap, the sketch of the two figures still in view. The door stayed unlocked that night. Not wide open, just unlocked. Enough for someone to knock again. Enough to be heard. Enough to let something in. The door remained unlocked, but no one knocked that morning. Eleanor moved through her apartment with a quiet she no longer mistook for peace. The kettle whistled earlier than usual. She poured 2 cups again, though she only held 1. She stood by the window, the light from outside just beginning to stretch across the brick walls of the building opposite. In her hand, she held the notebook Aiden had left. She had already memorized the last page. The sketch of the two of them, leaning against a shared barrier, felt like truth rendered in ink. She sat with the book on her lap, eyes tracing old sketches. On one page, a crooked houseplant bent toward a window. On another, a scarf coiled like a question mark. There were dates scribbled in the corners, and phrases that didn't belong to her but somehow fit. Every silence has a shape. What we don't say still echoes. Home is sometimes just a sound from below. She turned to a blank page. She picked up a pencil. She drew a teacup, then another, one slightly larger than the other. She shaded the space between them. The knock came at 4:02. She didn't flinch this time. She moved slowly, folded the sketchbook shut, and approached the door. When she opened it, Aiden stood there with his hair tousled, a thermos in one hand and a folded blanket in the other. "I thought maybe we could sit," he said. She stepped aside. He didn't enter. He laid the blanket on the hallway floor, sat cross-legged, and poured tea into 2 paper cups. She sat inside the threshold, the door open, the rug beneath her cold. They sat like that, the door between them no longer closed, but still there. "I had a dream last night," he said. She sipped her tea, listening. "I was back in her kitchen, but you were there too. And I was little, really little. She was teaching me to tie my shoes, and you were grading papers at the table." She nodded slowly. She looked at me and said, "You're watching everything again." I asked her why that mattered. She said, "Because watching is a kind of love." The hallway was still. A floorboard creaked somewhere above them. "I don't remember my mother's voice," he said, "but I remember hers. And now, I think I'll remember yours too." She didn't reply. She reached behind her and brought the scarf. Red, faded, but unmistakable. "She gave me this when I was too tired to teach," she said. "She said it would do the talking for me." Aiden leaned slightly forward. "It still does." She folded it in her lap. "She once told me I was the loneliest person she ever met. I thought she was wrong, but now I think she was just early." He smiled gently, his hands around the cup like it held more than tea. "I think she wanted us to find each other. I think she knew we would." They sat quietly. Steam rose between them. "I'm leaving soon," he said. "When school starts in September. Architecture, officially. It's a train ride away, not a lifetime." She nodded. The ache in her chest was familiar. She didn't flinch at it. "I wanted to tell you before I disappeared. I'm glad you did." He placed a folded piece of paper between them. "This is yours, but only if you want it." She opened it, a sketch of a building, a simple one. But in one of the top floor windows, there were 2 teacups drawn in. "Your new place?" "I'm designing it in my head." "Leave room for noise." "I will." She stood slowly. Her knees ached, but she didn't mind. "Come by tomorrow?" she asked. "Of course." He stood, collected the cups, and smiled. She watched him walk down the hall, his steps softer than ever before. When he turned the corner, she closed the door without locking it. She placed the scarf on the table, the sketch beside it. She didn't need to draw anything else that day. The scarf remained on the table all morning, catching bits of sunlight as the day unfolded quietly. Eleanor moved through the apartment like someone remembering how to breathe. She cleaned without needing to, rearranged the books on the shelf by color, and found a photo she didn't know she had kept. Marilyn holding baby Aiden, both of them wrapped in the same red scarf. She placed the photo beside the scarf. At 4, there was no knock. At 4:10, still nothing. She sat in her chair by the window, 1 cup poured, 1 cup waiting. Her fingers tapped the edge of the table. She checked the hallway, empty. She returned inside and left the door open. By 4:23, she began to fold the scarf again. At 4:29, footsteps echoed in the stairwell, quick, uneven. He appeared, hair damp from running, a notebook in hand. "Sorry," he said, breathless. "I lost track of time. I was drawing." She motioned to the other chair. He sat. "I drew you," he said. He opened the notebook and turned it around. The sketch was of her sitting by the window, tea in hand, the red scarf draped over the table, her expression unreadable, distant, but not cold. "It's beautiful," she said. "I didn't know how to show gratitude, so I drew." She ran her finger along the page. The moment looked truer in pencil than in memory. He reached into his bag and took out a second drawing. This one was of her mailbox, full. "I thought you might want to keep the words too." She smiled softly. "I kept them all." He looked around the apartment, the plants, the shelves, the wall clock that ticked slightly off rhythm. "It's different in here," he said. "It's lived in," she answered. "Feels like it." They sat without speaking for several minutes. "I found something yesterday," she said. She stood, walked to the shelf, and returned with a yellowed envelope. Inside, a letter. "Your mother wrote this. She gave it to me after graduation. I never answered. He unfolded the paper carefully, eyes scanning each line. She said you changed her life, he whispered. She changed mine too. He folded the letter again, slower this time. I think she'd be happy we met, he said. I think she planned it. He laughed under his breath. She did love a good twist. They drank tea until I began to fade. He stood first. I'll be gone next week, he said. A short trip to visit my uncle, but I'll be back. She nodded. Can I leave something here? He asked. She tilted her head. He pulled a small object from his bag, a brass key. I made a copy, in case you ever want to leave a note downstairs. She held the key in her palm. It's been years since I started anything new, she said. Then maybe it's time. He stepped into the hallway. She walked him to the door. I'll be back, he said again. I'll be here. She closed the door gently, not locked. The key rested in her hand, warmer than metal should be. She set it beside the red scarf and opened the window. The air smelled like rain. Rain arrived in the middle of the night, gentle at first, then steadier, tapping against the windows like fingers searching for attention. Eleanor rose early and sat by the window, watching the street below shimmer under a thin sheen of water. The plants on her sill perked up as if welcoming the change. She made tea for one. No knock was expected today. The key Aiden left sat beside the red scarf, its weight unfamiliar in her palm. She held it without moving for nearly an hour before finally sliding it into her coat pocket. At noon, she descended the stairs for the first time in days without a letter in hand. She walked past his door, pausing briefly, then continued to the lobby. The mailboxes buzzed with the hum of forgotten correspondence and dust. She opened hers, empty. She opened his, empty too. The space felt quieter without his drawings, his lines, his energy. She stood still in the lobby for several minutes. A woman entered with groceries and offered a smile. Eleanor nodded but said nothing. Her voice still felt packed away. Back upstairs, she folded towels, organized spice jars, rearranged the coat closet. By late afternoon, the apartment looked untouched and unlived. That evening, she opened the notebook he had left. Flipping through pages, she paused on one in particular, a rough sketch of a bird in flight, captioned beneath in his handwriting. Some things return, not because they must, but because they choose to. She stared at the drawing for a long time. By nightfall, the rain had stopped. She left the window open and fell asleep to the sound of dripping branches. The next morning, she opened the door and found nothing. No cup, no note, no sketch. She checked again at noon, then at 3, then at 4. By 5, she wrote a single sentence on a piece of paper and placed it inside his mailbox. Are you okay? She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. Another day passed, and another. The quiet returned with force. Not absence, but weight. On the 4th day, a knock came, not at 4, not soft, sharp, urgent, urgent. She opened the door. A woman stood there holding a jacket soaked through with rain and worry in her eyes. Are you Eleanor Mitchell? Yes. I'm his aunt. Aiden had an accident. He's stable, but he asked for you. Her hand went to the scarf on the table. Her other closed around the key in her coat pocket. She nodded. I'll go. She had not left the building in nearly a month. The world outside felt sharper, colder, louder. As she stepped into the back seat of the waiting car, the city moved past her window in gray streaks. Rain returned in scattered whispers against the glass. The hospital was too bright, too white. People moved quickly in quiet shoes. She walked behind Aiden's aunt through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and urgency. No one asked her who she was. She looked like someone with a reason to be there. Room 314. The door was ajar. Inside, Aiden lay propped against 2 pillows, one arm bandaged, a thin tube taped to his wrist. His eyes were closed, face pale, but not still. He looked as if he were listening to something behind his own eyelids. She took one step forward. His eyes opened slowly. He turned his head. The corners of his mouth lifted. You came. I told you I would. I didn't know if I should have left the key. I'm glad you did. She pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat. He looked thinner, more fragile, but still drawn in the same lines she had memorized from his sketches. What happened? She asked. Bicycle, wet pavement, bad combination. She exhaled through her nose. You don't look like someone who rides bicycles. I was trying something new. Well, she said, maybe start with tea. He smiled. They sat without speaking for a while. The beeping of the monitor became a rhythm they both accepted. Rain tapped gently against the window. I kept hearing her voice, he said. Your grandmother? He nodded. She was laughing. Then she said, You're not as careful as Eleanor. She always did think I walked too fast. She said you were cautious like a cathedral. She said that to you? No, I made it up. But it sounds like her, doesn't it? It does. He turned his head toward her, more serious now. I'm scared to go home. Why? I'm scared it won't feel the same. That I'll open the door and the quiet will be different. It will be. He looked at her, eyes steady. But different isn't bad, she said. It's just not the same. He closed his eyes again. She sat with him, listening to the rise and fall of his breath. I dreamed of the stairwell, he said. In the hospital? Last night. I was climbing it, but it never ended. And every few steps, there was a door with your voice behind it, but I never opened any. Why not? I didn't want to disturb the sound. She reached out and rested her hand on his. It was cold but not lifeless. You're allowed to knock, she said. He didn't reply. He just held her hand tighter. The nurse entered with soft steps, checking machines, adjusting something quietly. I should go, Eleanor whispered. Will you come back? Only if you promise to let me in. He nodded. As she stood to leave, he said, I kept all your notes. So did I. She walked out of the room, the corridor somehow quieter than before. In the lobby, she sat for a moment, folding and unfolding her gloves. She reached into her coat pocket and touched the key. Still warm. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world remained damp, waiting. She returned home just past dusk. The hallway smelled of damp carpet and old paint. Her key turned slowly in the lock, and the apartment greeted her with silence, the kind that settled into corners when no one was looking. She left her coat on the hook, the red scarf draped gently over the arm of the chair. The kettle took longer than usual to boil, or maybe she was slower than usual to notice. When it finally clicked, she poured water into 2 cups, placed one across from her at the table, and left it untouched. She opened the notebook Aiden had given her and turned to the sketch of her door again. This time she noticed something small in the corner, a date. The day he left the key, the day the door stayed open. That night she placed the sketchbook, the scarf, and the key on the windowsill, a small altar to things that had returned. The next morning, she wrote a note and slid it into his mailbox. Dear Aiden, your tea is cold. Come warm it up. She waited. At 4, the knock came, gentle, timid. She opened the door to find him standing with a new drawing in hand. This one was of the stairwell, mid-turn, her figure ascending, light flooding down from above. He stepped inside for the first time. They drank quietly, steam curling between them. I never said thank you, he said. You didn't have to. I still should. She poured more tea. You said once that she gave you the scarf when you were too tired to teach. Yes. Were you ever too tired to keep living? The question hung in the air like something not meant to be spoken, but needing to exist outside the body. Yes, she said. He didn't respond right away, just nodded. But I didn't stop, she continued, because of the sound of a pencil on paper, because of a hallway echo, because someone even once said my name like it mattered. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they were brighter. I want to build a space one day, he said, where people like you don't feel alone. Build it tall, she said. With good stairs, he replied, and thin walls. They both smiled. He stood to leave slowly. As he reached the door, he turned. Do you want it back? She looked at the key in his hand. No, she said. I think you'll need it again. He nodded, tucked it into his pocket, and stepped into the hallway. Before she closed the door, she called out softly, Aiden. He turned. Your grandmother would have been proud. He gave a quiet smile, then disappeared down the stairs. She stood at the threshold a moment longer. Then she closed the door, but not all the way, just until the latch rested in place, not locked. The cup he had used remained on the table. The steam had stopped, but the warmth lingered. The next week passed in a rhythm neither of them named but both felt. Aiden visited each afternoon, sometimes for tea, sometimes just to sit, sometimes with new sketches, sometimes with nothing at all. Eleanor never asked why he came. He never asked if he could. On the 5th day, he brought a box. What's that? She asked. Your mailbox. She raised an eyebrow. I made a replica for a project. I thought you should see it. He opened the lid. Inside were dozens of tiny rolled notes, each one a copy of something they had written. You remembered them all? I wrote them down after each one. I didn't want to forget. She picked one up, unrolled it. Jazz is overrated. Try silence. She smiled. You saved them. So did you. He took a seat on the floor beside her chair. She stayed at the table. I've been thinking, he said, about how you said you used to be brave in writing. I did. Do you miss it? She paused, not being afraid of my own thoughts. He looked down, nodded. I've been drawing something, he said. Not a building, a place. She waited. It's not real, but maybe it could be. A building with no walls, just open rooms connected by bridges, so you never have to knock. She closed her eyes and pictured it. That sounds like something she would have imagined, she said. I think it is. He stood, walked to the window. Do you ever wonder what she would say to us now? All the time. He turned back to her. Do you think she'd be proud? She'd be furious it took us this long. They laughed. That evening, he left earlier than usual. She stood in the doorway, watching him descend the stairs. At the third step, he paused. Can I ask you something strange? You already do. If something ever happened to me, would you keep writing? Yes. Even if I stopped answering? She didn't hesitate. Yes. He nodded once. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she opened her mailbox. Inside was a single note. Don't stop writing, no matter what. She looked down the stairwell. There was no sound, no echo, no knock. Not that day, not the next. 3 days passed. 4. The building felt different again. On the 5th day, she placed her own note in his box. Dear Aiden, I'm still here. I hope you are too. Eleanor. She returned upstairs, sat by the window and waited. The knock came at dusk. Not loud, not hesitant, just a single clear sound. Eleanor opened the door slowly. Aiden stood there, thinner, pale, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. I didn't mean to disappear, he said. I know. I thought I was ready to leave, he said, but I couldn't. Why not? Because I never said goodbye. She stepped aside. He entered without looking around, as if the apartment remembered him better than he remembered it. He sat at the table. She poured tea. No words for several minutes. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the faint rattle of a window frame. I was afraid, he said. Of what? That I would go, and it wouldn't matter. She placed her cup down. It would. He looked at her. Something fragile in his expression, like a boy asking a question with no safe answer. I wrote something, he said, but I can't read it out loud. He slid an envelope across the table. She opened it. 4 handwritten pages. His handwriting looser now, less guarded. She read the first line. If I never wrote again, it wouldn't be because I had nothing to say. She read slowly, silently. Her hand tightened once, relaxed. Her breath caught near the end. When she finished, she folded the pages carefully, then placed them back in the envelope. Thank you, she said. I didn't know who else could read it. I'll keep it. He looked down at his hands. I'm leaving next week, for real this time. School starts, new city, new walls. She nodded. But I want to keep writing. Then write, even if it's just to you, especially if it's just to me. He smiled, not wide, but real. They finished their tea. He stood. I'll send the first letter from the train. I'll answer. He hesitated at the door. I left something else, he said, in the mailbox for after I'm gone. She didn't ask what. He left. She waited until the hallway was silent again. Then she walked downstairs, opened his mailbox. Inside was a small envelope. No name. She opened it. Inside, a key. Not to her apartment, not to his. A note folded beneath it. To the building we made, the one with no doors. Use this when you miss the noise. She held the key in her hand, the metal warming quickly in her palm. She looked up the stairwell. Then she climbed, slowly, 1 floor, then another, up past her own apartment, to the top. She stood at the window on the landing and looked out over the city. Below, people moved like threads, weaving something she couldn't yet see. She placed the key in her pocket and began her letter. The first letter arrived 3 days after he left. It was addressed to Miss Eleanor Mitchell, 8C, written in blocky, uneven handwriting. The envelope was soft around the edges, as if it had been held too long before being mailed. Inside, a single page. Dear Eleanor, the building here is too new. Everything smells like paint and ambition. My neighbor plays violin badly. I haven't knocked on his door. Not yet. I walked today and thought about your window. There's a bench here that faces a red tree. I think you'd like it. I bought a plant. It's already dying. I hear your voice when I forget to water it. You're still here. Aiden. She placed the letter in the box beside the scarf. next to the key. The next letter came a week later, then another, and another. She answered each one, sometimes with a full page, sometimes with a sentence, sometimes just a sketch. She sent a drawing of the view from her window, of the mailbox, of the old tea kettle. They wrote about books, about the sound the stairwell made when it rained, about the way silence felt different now, not empty but paused. One afternoon, a small package arrived, inside a music box. When wound, it played the lullaby Marilyn used to hum. The melody filled the apartment slowly, gently, until it became part of the air. She placed it on the table, wound it each evening. Let it remind her. Weeks passed, then months. One letter mentioned a professor who reminded him of her. Another included a sketch of a library he was designing, one with staircases that looped back into themselves. He wrote, "I'm building something that has your laugh in the walls." She kept every word. Winter came. The building grew colder. She bought thicker socks, rearranged the furniture so the light would reach farther. Then one morning, a knock at the door. Not at 4, not expected. She opened it. A girl stood there. 18, maybe, holding a letter. "Are you Eleanor?" "I am. He asked me to bring this, said you'd know what it means." She handed over a thick envelope, then disappeared down the hall. Eleanor closed the door and sat at the table. The envelope was heavier than the others. Inside, a letter and another key. The letter read, "Dear Eleanor, it's not a door, it's a space. I bought it with a scholarship and a plan. One day, it'll have books and stairs and rooms that echo. For now, it's quiet. It needs you. Come visit, or don't. It's yours either way. The key is to your chair, the one you haven't sat in yet." She looked at the key. Simple, brass. She stood, opened the window, and let the cold air reach her skin. Then she packed a bag, placed the scarf gently inside, the letters, the sketchbook, the music box. She locked the door behind her and left the light on. The train ride was quiet. Eleanor kept the letter in her lap, folded neatly, read and reread until the words became a rhythm. Outside the window, the landscape moved in long, slow strokes. Bare trees, rusted fences, flashes of towns that looked like echoes of each other. She arrived at the station just after noon. Aiden wasn't there. No one was. She took a cab, gave the address written at the bottom of the letter. The driver didn't speak. She was grateful. The building stood alone on a hill, brick and unfinished, windows dark, a sign half hanging above the door, "To be opened." She stepped out, key in hand. The front door resisted, then gave way. Inside, dust floated in columns of light. The space smelled like wood and possibility. No furniture, just walls, staircases that bent like questions, rooms that opened into other rooms. At the far end, a single chair. She walked slowly toward it, footsteps muffled by time. The chair faced a window. On the seat, another envelope. Her name, written softly. She opened it. "Dear Eleanor, you're sitting where I imagined you would. I didn't fill this space because I hoped you'd do it. With your books, your silence, your tea, your voice. This place is for people who never wanted to speak loudly, who still deserve to be heard. Stay as long as you want, or leave and return. It will wait." Aiden, she placed the letter on the windowsill, sat in the chair. The view stretched endlessly, fields, rooftops, sky. She unpacked the scarf, laid it across her lap. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a pen and began to write. She wrote until the sun moved across the floor in long, golden ribbons, pages stacked beside her, heavy with ink and breath. Words flowed without resistance. She didn't think. She remembered. She listened. Each day after, she returned to the same chair, at first alone, then not. A woman appeared one morning, quiet and hesitant, holding a book she hadn't finished. She sat on the floor, didn't speak. The next day, a boy, maybe 15. He drew on napkins and didn't look up when Eleanor passed. A week later, 3 more. Then 7. No one asked questions. They found corners. They opened notebooks. They left things behind, scarves, cups, music. Eleanor brought more chairs. Aiden wrote less. But his voice remained, on the walls, in the steps, in the way people moved through the rooms. One afternoon, she received a letter. "Dear Eleanor, I think you've done something here. I think it's better because it's yours. Can I come see it soon? I miss the sound of your silence." Aiden, she smiled, folded the letter and placed it with the rest. That evening, someone knocked on the front door. She opened it. A woman stood there, familiar eyes, a nervous smile. "Mom said I should come. She said you were ready." Eleanor didn't speak. The girl stepped inside. "My name's Nora?" "I know." They sat by the window together. No apology, no explanation, just a shared sky. Later, Eleanor wrote, "Dear Aiden, your mother's granddaughter has your eyes. She found her way here. So did I. You were right about the key. It doesn't open a door. It opens a life. Eleanor." She placed the letter on the front desk where others could read it too. Then she returned to the window, took up her pen, and kept writing. The building had a heartbeat now. Chairs scraped softly against wood. Laughter came in whispers. Pages turned like wind through branches. Every room held someone or something left behind. A scarf on a hook, a mug on a windowsill, words taped to walls. Eleanor walked through the halls each morning with a notebook tucked under her arm. She greeted each person with a nod, sometimes a hand on the shoulder. Most days she stopped by the front desk. Aiden's key sat there in a shallow bowl next to a sign that read, "For when you forget the way back." Nora came often. She brought questions and music. She never rushed her way in. She let silence teach her something Eleanor had only recently learned. Being present was enough. One afternoon, as golden light angled through the upper windows, the door opened. Aiden stood there. He looked older, less uncertain, his hair longer, clothes familiar. In his hand, a folded drawing. He stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning the space. "It's different," he said. "It's yours too," Eleanor replied. They stood in the quiet. She didn't offer tea. He didn't ask for it. The moment didn't need filling. He handed her the drawing. She unfolded it. It was the building, the same bones, but now people inside, some sitting, some standing, some curled into corners with notebooks on their knees. "I kept drawing it," he said. "Every time I thought I was done, I saw something new." "You weren't drawing the building." "I know." They walked together, through rooms that echoed with quiet hums. He recognized details, her scarf on the back of a chair, a quote he'd written etched into the stair railing. They stopped at the window. Nora sat on the floor, sketching. "She's good," Aiden said. "She's not afraid of beginnings." "I wasn't either. Not until I met endings." Eleanor nodded. They sat. "I have something for you," he said. He placed a small wrapped box in her hand. She opened it. Inside, a fountain pen, red with gold edges. "Write something," he said. She opened her notebook. On the first page she wrote, "I stayed." He returned. We began again. Aiden read the words, closed his eyes. She would have liked this place. "She built it," Eleanor said. They sat as the sky turned violet, the building breathing quietly around them, a place made of noise, silence, and everything in between. Winter arrived softly. The first snow fell on a Tuesday morning, coating the window ledges and rooftops in quiet white. Eleanor watched it from her chair, wrapped in the red scarf, her hands around a warm cup. Across the room, a fire crackled low. The building was full but hushed, as if the walls themselves had paused to listen. Letters came more frequently now, from people who had visited, from those who had only heard stories. They were placed in a growing archive near the entrance, open for anyone to read. Nora curated them, pinning favorite lines on a long cork wall. She called it the listening room. Aiden visited once a month. He stayed longer each time. Sometimes he brought friends. Sometimes he stayed silent. Always, he drew. One day he arrived with blueprints. "I want to build another," he said. "Where? Doesn't matter, as long as it feels like this." They spread the plans across the table. Eleanor traced her finger along the corridors, the open stairwells, the wide sound-capturing walls. "Start with the window," she said. "Everything else will follow." That night she wrote a letter, folded it into an envelope, left it on the front desk. "To whoever finds this, this is not a place. It's a promise that someone is listening, that silence is not emptiness, that you matter, even when you feel forgotten." This was never about noise. It was about return. Welcome home. Eleanor's spring crept in weeks later, a warmth in the wood, brighter mornings, more laughter, new footsteps. The scarf stayed on the back of her chair. The music box sat beside the tea tray. The key remained in the bowl. And Eleanor, she kept writing, not to be heard, but because the words were still there, and someone might be waiting.